Okay, back in 2017, the city of Portland adopted a resolution declaring Portland a sanctuary city, which prohibits the city and its police force from helping with federal immigration enforcement. But the move was simply a resolution. The city's sanctuary status is not binding law. City Councilor Sameer Kanal is trying to change that and make the sanctuary status part of city code. He represents District 2, which includes North and Northeast Portland neighborhoods like St. John's and Concordia. Now, that ordinance, which could be introduced to full council as soon as next week, would require the city administrator to create new policies to protect and support those in the community who are impacted by ICE deportation efforts. Things like sanctuary city trainings, making sure city services are complying with the sanctuary city status, posting signs in city buildings about entry requirements, and having a person in charge of doing this work in each of the city's more than 24 bureaus. Now, all of that would go along with creating a work group to guide city policy and best practices related to federal immigration enforcement. Councilor Kanal also has plans for a different ordinance that aims to prohibit all law enforcement, including federal agents, from intentionally concealing their identities during routine operations and require officers to display their badges. It's no secret that many immigration enforcement raids are done with agents wearing masks or some kind of face covering. Currently, there is no policy in Portland that prohibits law enforcement from doing that. Okay, joining me now live in studio is Councilor Sameer Kanal. Councilor, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Okay,
so I think it's safe to say that no matter where you stand politically, everyone has seen or felt some sort of impact from recent immigration enforcement, even if you're just watching it play out online or on TV. So I'm curious, what have you heard or seen from your seat on council or even from those in your district?
Yeah, I hear about ICE every day. I hear about the risk of immigration raids from people who are at risk or think that they might be perceived to be. And so it's a common thing. It comes up. It's one of the things I get the most constituent communications about, and we need to be reactive to that. We've also seen some specific raids in Portland. We've seen ICE activity in Portland, and we need to be responsive to that before there's an escalation here.
You say making this change for the city of Portland would, quote, be putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to being a sanctuary city. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so as you said, our sanctuary status is non-binding. At the state level, the Sanctuary Promise Act is binding law. And so taking that and elevating it to the status of law at the city level is really important so that we're not just a sanctuary police bureau, but we're a sanctuary city. Our PPB has directives that ensure that they won't comply and support immigration enforcement. We need to make sure that the rest of the city is prepared to do our part and at city government and make sure that we're prepared for what comes next.
So your proposal would also call on the U.S. Congress to pass legislation to further safeguard civil rights. What exactly do you mean here specifically?
Well, due process. The idea that a person has the right to be, if they're going to be detained, to know who's doing it, why. The idea that a person deserves, if they're being detained, to be held in a humane fashion. There's a lot of different things related to that as well on the masks and identification side too. But yeah, it's about ensuring that we're following our law and our traditions and our Constitution.
Your other idea would, like you mentioned, prohibit officers, both local and federal, from wearing face coverings. Okay, so first, why do you believe that needs to change? And then does the city even have the authority to dictate how federal officers dress?
Yeah, so in terms of why we're doing it, it's because if you're going to be detained, if you're going to have your liberty taken away from you, you deserve to know who's doing it. And one of the ways that we see that play out is with masked federal agents, but there's also the risk of people impersonating a federal agent. We don't want to have that happen here, where someone can commit a crime and just not be interacted with because they claim to be ICE. That's a really big risk that we've seen in other cities. And so we want to make sure that we're responsive to that. As for the rest, the federal government can choose to ignore state law. They can choose to ignore local law. That doesn't mean that we should just give up and stop doing our jobs to create law. And Portlanders have been asking, as I mentioned, they're seeing what California has done. They're seeing what's happened in Chicago and LA and all these other places and saying, when is my city going to step up and stand for me? And it's time that Portland does that. And this is a small piece of how we're going to do that.
You think Portland can be doing more?
Absolutely. And so a lot of colleagues are working on this. This is the first of a few different things. I know Councilor Avalos is working on a citywide preparedness plan so that people are ready, including our staff and contractors, in case ICE shows up. I know Councilor Murillo is working on policies on data privacy, on detention centers and their impact on our community, and on private security usage by the federal government too. There's a lot of work being done, and a lot of councilors stepping up and working on it.
So we know there have been nightly protests outside the ICE office in South Portland, impacting many residents there. A nearby school even relocated this summer to get away from all the noise and chaos. Since June, at least 26 protesters have been charged with federal offenses tied to that ICE office. It's according to the Associated Press. And President Trump recently got wind of these ongoing protests, and he said he is now considering sending National Guard troops here. He said Portland is, quote, like living in hell. What do you make of that comment, and what message do you have for the president?
I have a great time living in Portland. I've lived other places. I left for 14 years and I wanted to come back pretty much every day. And it's a great place to live. We don't need federal assistance in following the law here or in supporting a safe community. We're seeing a lot of reports come out. We just had a report showing that downtown traffic is up for the highest level since before the pandemic. So we're seeing a lot of really positive news here. If people want to say something else to advance a political cause, they can do that. But we're able to handle our own business here.
Okay, Councilor Kanal, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now it's your turn. What do you think about Councilor Kanal's proposals? Do you support them? Why or why not? Share your thoughts with us. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090.